For years, it felt like the story of energy was a one-way street, right? Away from the old fossil fuels, full speed ahead towards a greener future. But in a pretty stunning reversal, coal, the oldest of the old school fuels, is making this incredible, powerful comeback. So let's get into what created this perfect storm.
And it really is the big question, isn't it? Here we are, in a world that's totally laser-focused on cutting carbon, and yet we're seeing a record-shattering surge for the most carbon-heavy fuel there is. So what gives? How is that even possible? Well, the answer is a messy collision of big finance, geopolitics, and just the cold, hard reality of how we power our world.
And this quote from Michel Manoch, man, it just nails it. This isn't just some blip in the market. This is a fundamental shift in priorities. All those big, future-facing goals are suddenly slamming up against the very real, right now need to just keep the lights on.
To get a sense of the scale here, just look at this number, 8.85 billion tons. That was the record-breaking global demand for coal back in 2023. And get this was before the crisis we're about to talk about even happened. It just goes to show how vital coal still was for the big industrial powerhouses, especially in Asia.
Okay, so how did one single event manage to pour gasoline on this fire? Well, to get that, you first have to understand just how fragile the whole global energy system had become. And that brings us to something called the ESG paradox.
So for, the better part of a decade, this idea of ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance investing, became a huge deal in the world of finance. The whole idea was to basically turn off the money tap for fossil fuel projects. And you know what? It worked. Maybe. A little too well.
This slide really breaks it down. You can see right here, all that ESG pressure meant less money for new mines, old equipment wasn't getting updated, and new regulations made it almost impossible to get new supply going. What that means is the world's supply of coal became incredibly, inelastic. It just couldn't ramp up to handle a shock. And this quote from Michael Gable, it just perfectly captures that disconnect. See, while the world of finance was pulling back from coal, the real world's need for reliable, round-the-clock power, that never went away. This huge gap was opening up between policy dreams and the gritty reality of keeping the grid stable. The whole system was a crisis waiting to happen. And then, it happened. February 28, 2026, a geopolitical flashpoint in the most critical energy choke point on the planet. And in an instant, that simmering fragility just exploded into a full-blown global emergency.
And it all went down so fast. February 28, U.S.-Israeli strikes hit Iran. Iran's immediate response? They shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Just like that. A day later, all the major shipping companies stopped sending their ships through. Vessel traffic just died. And within 48 hours, the global energy market was in absolute shock.
Okay, so the first domino to fall, oil. We're talking about one-fifth of the entire world's daily oil supply, just gone, wiped off the market overnight. It was the biggest supply disruption anyone had seen in decades. But wait, that wasn't all. At the exact same time, another 20% got yanked from a totally different market, global liquefied natural gas, or LNG. Almost all of that came from Qatar, whose ships were now totally blocked. And this is where things get really interesting for the coal market. So, you've got the world's most critical energy artery completely clogged. What happens next? A desperate, global free-for-all for whatever energy is left. And countries very quickly started realizing just how vulnerable they were. And this slide really shows you the pickle everyone was in. Over in Europe, they're already hurting for gas after moving away from Russia. Now, their Qatari supply is gone too. Meanwhile, in Asia, you've got giants like Japan and South Korea. They import over 80% of their energy, and their main supply line just got cut. You could just feel the ferocious bidding war about to erupt. So, what do you do when the gas disappears? You have to find an alternative that can provide what's called baseload power. That's the bare minimum electricity the grid needs, 24/7, just to keep society from grinding to a halt. And when you need that on a massive scale and gas is off the table, well, there's really only one option left: coal. All over the world, power companies started firing up every coal plant they could find. And you can see the market reaction right here. It was instant. It was violent. After bottoming out in 2025, the price of thermal coal just surged. Demand was absolutely exploding, but remember what we said earlier? The supply side was still incredibly tight. It just couldn't keep up.
Now, in any crisis, someone benefits. And this time, it created an absolute gold rush for a very specific group of producers who just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right stuff.
Okay, so here's the key. The Hormuz crisis, it shut down energy trade from the Middle East, but it did nothing to the huge coal shipping routes running between Australia, Indonesia, and their customers all over Asia. For these miners, it was like a competitor's factory burning down while their own was running at full steam.
Let's take a company like Stanmore Resources. They're a perfect example. A pure Australian coal producer, just coming off a record year. They were basically sitting on a mountain of what the world was now screaming for, with a clear, safe path to sell it.
And they were not alone, not by a long shot. Look at this table. You've got the big players here. Yancoal, Whitehaven, New Hope. The big things to notice are their massive production numbers and, critically, their super low operating costs. When prices are through the roof and your costs are that low, well, you're not just making money, you are printing it. And a lot of them have policies to pay a big chunk of that right back to shareholders.
And it's pretty much the same deal over in Indonesia, the world's biggest exporter of thermal coal. Now here's the funny part. The government was actually about to cut production quotas to help stabilize prices, but, and this is the kicker, the biggest producers, companies like Adaro Energy, they were exempt. So they were free to just open the taps and feed that massive new demand from all their neighbors.
So, where does all this leave us? What's the bigger picture here? Well, this whole crisis has really peeled back the layers on the global energy system, and it's forced a conversation that a lot of people probably didn't want to have.
This quote from Future Coal, it just completely reframes the whole debate, doesn't it? The conversation isn't when do we get rid of coal anymore. Now it's, okay, how do we deal with the coal we clearly still need? That's a huge shift. We're talking about years of policy basically being rewritten in a matter of days.
And that leads us with this final, massive question. This crisis, it ripped open this huge conflict between our climate goals and our non-negotiable need for energy security. So, was this just a blip, a crazy temporary shock to the system, or did we just witness a fundamental, permanent shift in how we're going to power our planet? That's the new reality we're all facing now.